Now that you're aware of brain steps and our goal to help students return to learn following a concussion or other brain injury, we'll get into part two. And these are some basic concussion facts. I will start by saying that what I've learned since my involvement with brain steps is that when you've seen a concussion, you've seen a concussion. It is very difficult to generalize one concussion to any other concussion. Every student is unique, every situation is unique and requires very unique and individualized attention. Some general concussion facts that are known through research is that all concussions are serious. It is not necessary for a student to become unconscious to be classified as a concussion, and it is very difficult to medically diagnose a concussion. A brain scan or an MRI will not just emphatically say, yes, you have a concussion. The what ends up happening is you end up seeing the change in the behavior and the change in the ability of the individual to determine whether a concussion has occurred. But all concussions are serious because they are in fact impacting the brain. What research has shown us is that 80% of concussions do resolve during the first 3 weeks. So that is very good, encouraging news to know that in most cases, when a student experiences a concussion, you can look for those symptoms to improve and even disappear and not be a problem after 3 weeks. 90% resolve in 4 weeks. So even if it doesn't do in the first 3 weeks, the majority will resolve within 4 weeks. But in some cases, so that's in 10% of the cases, symptoms from the concussion persist for much longer. Approximately 1 to 5% last an entire lifetime. So that is why it goes back to the first statement I made, where I said all concussions are serious. Some could have lasting and lifetime effects. If you've never experienced a concussion or known someone who has, it would be interesting for you to do some research and see if there was some simulations or things like that to explain further what a concussion actually does to the brain. What are some of the major signs and symptoms? So when we're looking at a student that has experienced a concussion, we do like to consider what was that student's behavior or ability before the injury compared to what it's like after the injury. Many times we have students that could possess, when you look at this chart, they already experienced headaches. They have medically diagnosed headache condition, or they're more emotional than their siblings or their peers usually are, or they have some type of a sleeping issue, or they have difficulty remembering new information. And that was who they were before the injury. So if that was who they were before the injury, and then they continue to experience those same symptoms, what you're looking at is, are they worse or are they the same as pre and post injury? But say you have a typical, very healthy young man or woman that they have never had any of these signs or symptoms on this chart before, and then they have a concussion. And then all of a sudden they can't think clearly. They have dizziness. They are sad, and they never really were much, they weren't sad before. They're having trouble falling asleep. Those are symptoms that the concussion management team would capture. If they're referred to brain steps, we would ask the parents what symptoms they're seeing. We would ask the teachers what symptoms they're seeing. Sometimes the students don't have any symptoms until maybe after lunchtime, or maybe they come into school and they already have a headache when they're there. So it's a matter of trying to figure out what symptoms, what context are the symptoms becoming worse, and in what situations are they needing to be addressed. But the signs and symptoms cover the areas of thinking and remembering, physical symptoms, emotional and mood, and sleep. Those are the four main areas of signs and symptoms that we're looking at. So again, students may experience one of these, they may experience all of these. So that's like I said, when you see one concussion, you see one concussion. Sometimes there's some red flags that are flying. Okay, so I made a couple references to this before. Perhaps the student has already had 3 other concussions. There are different modifiers that exist in us as people that could cause the symptoms to be prolonged, or cause the student to not recover as quickly. So if they have a history of previous or past concussions, that is a red flag for us to see that, oh, okay, this is not their first concussion. So let's see if they have different symptoms, worsened symptoms, new symptoms. If they have a history of migraines. So migraines were something that were happening before the injury that could exasperate or cause additional issues when they're recovering from the concussion. Do they have a history of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? That is something that if they have that history, it's a modifier to perhaps cause the symptoms of a concussion to prolong. Do they have a history of learning disabilities? Do they actually have a diagnosed learning disability that they've already been getting support with within the school setting? So the brain injury could become a secondary disability at some point. Do they have a history of depression? Research has shown that people that have been diagnosed with depression do have more issues in recovering fully from concussions or brain injury. Does the individual have a history of any other mental health disorder? Research is showing, again, just like the previous things I mentioned, if there is a medically diagnosed mental health disorder, that is also causing some additional issues with a concussion. And do they have a history of sleep disorders? Have they already been medically diagnosed with not being able to sleep for the recommended amount of time, sleeping too much, sleeping at odd moments? So again, any of these things on the screen, when a student is referred, we have a conversation with the student and the parent to determine if any of these modifiers existed prior to the injury, and that just helps us inform our plan for the future. Brain steps is critical in doing this. Okay, we are trying to take the puzzle pieces and put them all together in a complete picture and a support framework for the student. So we're looking at what's going on in school, we're looking at what's going on in the medical lens, and we're looking at what's going on with the family and the home life. And with those three, we're creating a partnership um, that is crucial to help students who are slowly recovering from concussion, the students that don't recover within that 3 to 4 weeks. So is there something that's impeding the recovery? Is there a vision issue that we need to have medically treated or therapy? Is there a vestibular issue, which prior to my work in BrainSteps, I did not know what that was. So vestibular is with your balance, balance and motion. So there are therapists that actually provide support for that. Does the student have a history of any of the red flag modifiers that I mentioned on the previous slide? So the medical professionals can help identify the issues, and then the school professionals can help identify appropriate academic accommodations, and the communication is key. So this is where Brain Steps comes in. Brain Steps serves as the predominant and the primary communicator between the medical professionals, the school professionals, and the student and family. So Brain Steps is the strategies for teaching educators, parents, and students. So we are the main communicators, just making sure everybody sees all of the pieces of the puzzle. That concludes part 2 of the Brain Steps. So please take a moment to look at your anticipatory guide and answer any questions related to part 2.